Johnny Wright, I've been watching you and Miss Kitty sitting over there. Y'all know a lot of these old hymns and gospel songs, don't you?
Oh, I'll tell you for sure we know a lot of them. We learned in Mount Juliet way back before they had automobiles.
You've told all the stories about y'all dating and all that kind of stuff. Did y'all go to church together? Was that part of what you did when you were sparking Miss Kitty?
Well, we never went together for a while, you know, because when I met Kitty, I wasn't going to church.
She changed that.
She straightened you out?
Yeah, Kitty straightened me out, you know. I was born in Mount Juliet. I was kidding. I did go to church, but I met Kitty in Nashville, back in the early 30s. And we started dating and married in 1937. And she went to church every Sunday. And she really taught me how to sing, what little I know about it. And we'd get the old guitar and drive around I had an old 31 Chevrolet. And I taught her how to drive. She couldn't drive the car, but we was going down the road one day, and I said, get in this automobile, get on my side here, and I'll get over there, and you drive this car. And she never driven before. And boy, what a driver she was. I wanted to stop at a grocery store and get us a cold drink, you know. And so I said, stop here, and she just wheeled in, slid the wheels, threw rocks everywhere.
He waited till he got right up to the place and said, pull in here. So I did what
That's when he started the church.
All of a sudden.
That's when he found religion.
That's when they started to pray.
Yeah, that's when I learned to pray. That's right. I said, oh, Lord, help me that I may never ask her to drive again.
I can drive better than that now, though, a little better.
She drives now. We nicknamed her Dale Walter. We call her DW. When she comes
I
over,
don't drive that fast.
she comes over to the museum. We say, "Here comes DW." She'll wheel in. She waits till she gets right to the place, then zip, she'll pull it.
Well, you taught me that.
When Johnny and Jack were recording, y'all did some gospel things, didn't you?
We sure did. We did a lot of gospel songs, and we still do. On the show every night, we feature 2 or 3 gospel songs. We'll have Kitty lead one, and then we'll all team up with her. And then we do a lot of songs like He Will Set Your Fields on Fire and Farther Along, and just a little talk with Jesus and different ones like that. But I usually do the lead on it, and Kitty get the high part. And then we have our son, Bobby, that does the bass. We do a lot of them like that. And
well, you got a whole choir here with you today. Do a little bit of just a little talk with Jesus. That's a
all
great
right.
song.
And we always do a couple of verses, but I say there's 3 down here. We can do, if you want to, we'll do the first verse, and then have a little play out, and then come back and do the last one. Or we'll try to do the third along with it. I may kind of mess it up a little, but we can take the mess out.
Do what you want to do. Just enjoy.
Yeah, we'll start it off and let the band take it off, and then I'll come in here and do the verse, and then everybody can pick it. It takes the bass in it, you know. You know how to sing it. Stonewall and get the bass on it. Jimmy Ed. I once was lost in sin, but Jesus took me in, and just a little talk with Jesus set me soul. It made my heart in love and wrote my name above, and just a little talk with Jesus made me whole.
Have a little talk with Jesus.
Let us tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. When you feel a little prayer returning and know a little fire is burning, you will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right. I may have doubts and fears, my eyes may fill with tears, but Jesus is a friend who watches day and night. I go to him in prayer, he knows my every care, and just a little talk with Jesus makes it right. Now let us have a
a little talk with Jesus. Tell him all about our troubles. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. When you feel that prayer will turning and know that fire is burning, you will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right.
Now let us
Have a little talk with Jesus.
let us
Tell him all about our trouble. He will hear our faintest cry. He will answer by and by. When you feel a little prayer will turning and know that fire is burning, you will find a little talk with Jesus makes it right.
Great job. Thank you. It's Jimmy Newman sitting behind you back there. I was wondering, as George was telling the stories about the churches in England, you grew up in the Bayou country of Louisiana. How were the Cajun services? Are they different from what the rest of us might know?
Well, I had a lot of English naturally, but I was brought up with a French preacher, and he was a big man, and he's a big preacher, and when he'd get real excited, he'd get red in the face. He was preaching hellfire and brimstone, and he'd take off walking across the pews, and we'd just about hit under the pews whenever, because he was preaching. But one of the funny things that happened that I never forgot was the word woe is universal, French or English, because this Cajun, it's a little country church where I was close to where I was raised, probably around a mile, maybe not that far. And he had a new team of horses. They had come in the wagon, the church, had a new team of horses, just broke. And he was very concerned about this new team. So where he had them tied real handy where he could, and he sat close to the window where he could watch them. And so there they were, a little nervous, and directly one of them started, you know how Leroy knows, he raises mules a lot. One of them started pulling against the other one, and this Cajun jumped up and said, "Whoa!" right in the middle of the sermon. Right in the middle of it. And so, but he couldn't speak English, but he knew that word for sure.
That's a pretty good sermon in itself. Whoa, that's a one-word sermon sometimes. Yeah, Charlie.
Newman said to me a while ago, I forget who was telling the story, he said, it was about they don't fight when they're singing. He says, whoever told that story hadn't been to South Louisiana.
Jimmy Davis, that was Jimmy Davis said
he's
that,
from
Governor
Louisiana.
Davis, but he hadn't been to South Louisiana yet. He hadn't been governor yet. And of course, we're we're talking about nightclubs. That's when we, in the middle of a very serious song, the fight would start in a nightclub. Well, then the owner said, "Now always when that starts, start playing Hold That Tiger." That only incite the whole thing, but that's what he wanted. I guess he said it meant Hold That Cajun.
Do us a song, Jim.
I'm going to try to do this. Now, a lot of our songs were, French, and I hadn't done it since those days as a little boy, singing farther along. A lot of our songs were, the sermons were in French, and the songs were in French. So let's see, I'm going to stood up here so I can see the words. They got them written in English over there, and I'll try to sing them in English. Okay, and you guys help us out on the chorus. Tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be this all the day long, while there are others living about us, never molested, though in the wrong. Father alone will know all about it. Father alone will understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When we see Jesus coming in glory, when he comes from his home in the sky, then we shall meet him in that bright mansion. We'll understand it all by and by. Father alone will know all about it. Father alone will understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. C'est tout, merci bien. Thank you.
Can you sing a chorus of that in French?
No, I'd have to work on it. That's been too long. Back then, too, we did it a little different. And like with on the sidewalk, we didn't know what meter was in either. So
Somebody used to tell a story about hearing a disc jockey one time on Father's Day saying he wanted to play a song for all the fathers, and he played Father Alone.
He lost his job, too.
Oh, did you know him?
Yeah, I knew him. He worked on Red Foley Valley. I can't remember his last name. Curley. You remember it, Martha? Anyway, John Lair said, this is Father's Day. I want everybody to do a Father's Day song. So he got up and he said, I want to dedicate this to all the fathers here today. Says it's Father's Day song. The title of the song is Father Alone. John thought he was kidding, but he wasn't.
Well, I learned to sing from the great old land of Goshen. I thought that's what they were saying all my growing up years. Goshen, from the great old land of Goshen. I sung it that way till I was 15.
Bobby Lord, you got a song that is not one of the old traditional Pentecostal gospel songs, but it's certainly one that everybody knows.
I thought I would do this today because, first of all, I love the song. And secondly, there's a little story behind it that needs telling. It's pretty common knowledge that Willie Nelson wrote this song. And in a moment where he needed a few bucks, sold it for $50 to a couple of other individuals. And I thought that was right interesting. But when you stop and think about it, a songwriter writes for money, and this was money when he needed it. And even though he hasn't sold one for $50 since. Let's do Family Bible. There's a family Bible on the table. The pages are torn and hard to read, but that family Bible on the table will ever be my key to memory. I can see us sitting round the table when from the family Bible Dad would read, and I could hear my mama softly singing, Rock of Ages, cleft for me. At the end of day, when work was over, and when the evening meal was done, Dad would read to us from the family Bible, and we'd count our many blessings one by one. I can see us sitting round the table when from the family Bible Dad would read, and I can hear my mama softly singing, Rock of Ages, clap for me. Rock of Ages, clap for me.
Bobby, you worked for many years with one of the greatest singers of gospel songs and hymns that the world has ever known, the great Red Foley.
Right.
You talked to Red one time about what he was thinking when he was singing those hymns.
Yeah, I asked him because he did the hymns so well, and every night, of course, he would close the show on the Ozark Jubilee with a hymn, and I said, Red, you know, you really have such a way of singing hymns. What's your secret to that? Do you have a special secret to that? He said, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. He said, I pretend when I'm singing these hymns that I'm sitting on my mama's couch and I look across the room to my mama and papa and I sing to them. And if you remember, at the end of every show, he said, good night, mama, good night, papa. And great singer, but the greatest singer of hymns I've ever known.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might have told this story before, but made me think of that. But he used to go for Berea, to the homecoming. Were you ever there, Bobby?
Yeah.
Yeah, and one time I got to go work there, and his mother and father were there. And I might have mentioned this before, but it was so wonderful, and you could feel the presence of the Lord because he was outside, and he was singing "God Walks These Hills with Me," and you could see him up there, walking back there, and I'm telling you, it's just like, I don't know, you expected God to walk over any minute, but his mother and father there, and you said singing to them, but it was just such a wonderful thing. It's always been in my mind, that particular performance and that homecoming at Berea. It was great. I was so glad to get to be there.
I had the privilege of working a show with Red Foley at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And this was after my son had been at Fort Polk. And he was such a comfort to me when we were there. And it was outside, and all these guys in fatigues and everything, and they just come in off of what do you call it? Bivouac, yeah. And anyway, they're all sitting out there in the open field, and it was hot and everything. And of course, I got up there and did my best, and I can't remember who else was on the show. But that was the first time I think I had ever literally seen anyone hold an audience in the palm of their hand. And those guys were all out there yelling and everything, but when Red Foley stepped on that stage, it was like just a peace, a quiet fell over there. And you could have heard a pin drop, and all those hundreds of guys out there. And it brought tears to my eyes. In fact, I cried. But I was so thankful that he was there for these guys, because most of them were going to Vietnam. And when he sang Peace in the Valley and all these, it was something else. And I'm thankful that I was a part of it.
You know, Bill, I worked with Red the last show that he worked the night that he passed away. And the last words that he uttered on stage was, "Good night, Mama, good night, Pop." Of course, they were gone, but he always done this. I don't think people really realize the impact that Red Foley had on the gospel scene, even though he was considered a country singer.
Charlie?
Well, I was fortunate enough to get to work a couple performances with Red Foley. Although I love his singing, I think he's one of the sweetest, greatest narrators of the talking songs. I love that. And he had the best control. You know, you run into these people that bug you in the audience sometimes. I know Homer and Jethro always just lived and hoped for a heckler in the audience. But Red Foley had the neatest way to handle, and I was on a show once when he did that. He had some guy, just when he was fixing to do his hymn, this guy got loud in the audience. And he said, well, I could call you bad names because I got the microphone, you know. And he said, I used to do that. He said, but one time I had a guy about like that, and I called him all kind of names and everything. And then after the show, this little old lady came up to the stage and said, Mr. Foley, about a month ago, we found out that you was going to come here and do a show tonight. And I just knew I had to come. I couldn't get nobody to keep my voice, so I brought him. And so by this time, Foley's got tears. He could turn his tears on anytime he wanted to. And he said, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to break another little old mother's heart. And this guy, he probably crawled under a chair.
Jim Ed, you're talking about singing in the little church. Weren't many people. Now, did your sisters, did Maxine and Bonnie come and join you? I mean, I can just picture the three of y'all standing up and singing those beautiful hymns in this little church.
You know, I suppose that Mother had all of us singing at one time or another, you know. But, and my daddy, you know, whenever he could go to church with us, he would. But I love to sing, and these old songs, Mother would go around the house singing them. But can I do a little bit of a song that, to me, this song tells a great story. And it kind of reminds me of that little church where we first started going. It's called the Church in the Wildwood. Yeah. There's a church in the valley by the wildwood, no lovelier place in the day. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the bay. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the wildwood. Come to the church in the bay. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the bay. So sweet on a clear Sabbath morning to listen to the clear ringing bell. No song so sweet, I forgot the words to my song, as the little brown church in the vale. Oh, come, 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 come to the church in the wildwood. Come to the church in the day. No spot is so dear to my childhood as the little brown church in the bay.
This is a true story, too. And when I was about, I don't know how old I was, but I was young, and I went to church to sing, and I was going to sing Jesus Wants Me for a Sunbeam. And my mama had me all fixed up, and I kept going, and I could never get it started right. And finally, she just said, sit down. So I had to sit down. So a few months later, I taught myself how to chord on the piano. And a few months later, the preacher came by, and she said, now, why don't you sing a nice song for the preacher? And I said, okay. And I was very ornery. You might not know that, but I was a very ornery child. So I sat down at the little, yes, I was. So I sat down, I knew I was going to get flogged, but it was better to do it and didn't get flogged. So I sat down at the piano and I played Pistol Packin' Mama, lay that pistol down, drinking beer in a cabaret. And they both of them, and what she would do, she would give me the eye like that. I got the worst whipping, I think one of the worst I ever got.
I got to tell, that reminds me, that must have been in 1942.
Oh, I don't know.
She was born in 48.
I know you're not that old. Well, because Pistol Packin' Mama was on everybody's tongue. When she said she started singing Pistol Packin' Mama, it just rung a bell in my head. We were at Sunday school one day, and whenever Pistol Packin' Mama was hot, whatever year it was, and the Sunday school teacher said, "Would someone like to get up and sing a song?" And sure enough, I got up and started singing Pistol Packin' Mama. And she says, "Why, son, that's not the kind of songs we sing in church."
Y'all would have known y'all could have done it 2 years ago.
Yeah, we could have done it.
Hey, don't feel bad about that, because my baby brother, he had one of these little old horn you just, kazoo, I call them, you know. And so he was at the church. They had a little play going on there, and he played, "Yes, sir, that's my baby." "No, sir, I don't."
My youngest daughter, Jenny, when she was just about 3 years old or so, went to church with us one time at Christmas time. And the preacher got up at the end of the service and he said, "We're going to close the service. Everybody's singing Joy to the World." And my little daughter jumped up and said, "That's my favorite song. Jeremiah was a bullfrog."
Bill, I have to raise my hand. Speaking of funny stories, my youngest daughter, Anita, I'm pretty sure it was Anita, not Mitzi, but anyway, she was in the preschool, little Sunday school at church, and she loved Bobby Bear, and still does. But, I mean, she could remember all the words to all these albums. I mean, not only Bobby Bear, but Elvis, whatever. And but they were very much into the preschool and the Sunday school and everything. Well, they went one morning, and the teacher was asking all the little children to sing their favorite little Bible song. So she got up and sang, I was sitting in Fridays sucking on a glass of wine. That song of Bobby Bear's called 10. When in walked this chick, her legs were long and fine, and before they got her stopped and said, "No, that wasn't it." And they had a talk with my son and daughter-in-law after that. Teacher. She also knew Jesus loved me, but she wouldn't sing it.
While you've got the floor, sing us a song.
All right, I chose one. I'm like the rest of them. I can't sing sitting down. One that I don't know if everybody known. I've known most of my life. I've just recently learned all the lyrics to read, really. But we were talking about singing first in church and everything. I didn't really do that. I sang kind of around home, but we didn't have a church that close in West Plains, out in the country. But we had one, very small, little church, but it was only when the preacher was in town, because he was a traveling preacher. And sometimes it'd be on Saturday or Tuesday or whatever. And he was my brother-in-law's brother-in-law, I think. And it was Uncle Elmer, I remember. And you go to that church, and they didn't have music in the church. Everything was... well, I mean, they had singing, but not instruments. And everything was in minors and everything. And that's where I first heard the song, which I'm not going to sing that song, but Wayfaring Stranger. No, really. But anyway, the preacher would get up there, and when he would preach hellfire and damnation, and I was scared to death because I knew I was going. And but then when he was finished, he'd just quit. He'd say, "Okay, it's time to sing now." But he'd always say, "Not you, Ed. You can't carry a tune in a bucket." And Ed was his son. But anyway, that was my experience at church the first time. Okay, we chose one called Unclouded Day that everybody can sing. And please do. Oh, they tell me of a home far beyond the sky. They tell me of a home far away. They tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, the land of a cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where my friends have gone. They tell me of a home far away, where the tree of life in eternal bloom sheds its fragrance on an unclouded day. Oh, the land of the cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home when those storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Okay, Derek on the piano while I breathe. Well, they tell me of a king in his glory there. And they tell me that mine eyes shall behold, where he sits on a throne that is white as snow, in a city that is made of gold. Oh, the land of the cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home where no storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Well, they tell me that he smiles on his children there, and his smiles drive their sorrows away. And they tell me that no tears ever come again in that lovely land of uncloudless day. Oh, the land of the cloudless day. Oh, the land of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of a home when all storm clouds rise. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Oh, they tell me of an unclouded day. Unclouded day.
Good job. Yeah, that's great, James.
You know, Bill, she's talking about funny things that happened in church. Connie Smith was telling me this. 1966, somewhere in that neighborhood, that Ted went to church, and he took a little boy, and they were singing, you know, Amazing Grace. And the last line was blind, but now I see. And everything for quiet for a second, and the little boy went, do-do-do-do-do. I swear, it's very stupid.
My youngest daughter, Jenny, when she was just about 3 years old or so, went to church with us one time at Christmas time. And the preacher got up at the end of the service and he said, we're going to close the service. Everybody's singing Joy to the World. And my little daughter jumped up and said, that's my favorite song. Jeremiah was a bullfrog. Margot?
This will be quick. I used to go to Switzerland often because of the yodeling, and I was over there, and my daughter and I went over there, and we had made a pact because we had put out some Christian albums, and we said we'll never sing unless a concert, whether it's country or not, unless we include a wonderful Christian song in our concert. So we're over there in Switzerland, and it's 9 o'clock, and we're both so very, very tired. And I looked at Holly, and I went, oh, Holly, let's just go out. They don't understand anything. It was on the side where they speak French. And so they're all dancing and carrying on. And so I said, let's just go out and sing our songs, honey, and not worry about our Christian songs because they won't understand anyhow. And then I looked at her and I went, no, a promise is a promise. So we got up and we sang our song, and that night this one guy came up and he said, you know, that song Holly sang gave me chickens. Means gave him goosebumps. And it really did something to his life. And you know, sometimes being country singers, that might be, I think a lot of people, well, most people that go to churches, most of them are saved anyhow. But we might be the only little light of Jesus that they see. And you can reach a lot of people by just singing a song like that.
The Whites have done a lot of gospel music over the years. That's an important part of your music, isn't it, Sharon? Gospel music.
It sure is. It's because we believe in what we're singing about. And, you know, I heard different ones talking earlier about getting to do a gospel album or singing their gospel songs sometimes and people not wanting them to. We've just always included gospel songs as part of our show because it's part of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And and that's right, part of every album. We've been fortunate enough that every album we've done, we've had at least one gospel song on it. We told them in the beginning that that's kind of how we are, how we live, and how we sing our show. So they allowed us to do that. And I remember when we finally did get to cut an all-gospel album, it was like a dream come true for us, and it's probably one of our most favorite projects we ever did. It's got some wonderful songs on it. The thing that was so funny was for all the years that we'd sung gospel songs as part of our show and made a big production about loving Jesus. I mean, that's just a big part of it to us. Well, people just assumed then, because of a gospel album coming out, that we had gone totally gospel in our music. And I said, no, we haven't gone anywhere. We're still where we, and you know, I believe that, well, the Lord told us that He'd go anywhere we wanted to take Him. And I live like that. I believe that He's not ashamed to go and sing in a honky-tonk or a nightclub or He'll be there with it because He's part of me. You know, He's in it. He lives in it.
And He loves everybody unconditionally and everybody the same. And a lot of people, we kind of can forget that. But, you know, God loves everybody the same. And He's going to go where He's needed.
Amen.
Isn't that neat? I want the Whites to sing.
To the glory of God.
And let me get this up where I don't have to bend over here.
Pull it in.
Just turn me up a little bit. Turn me up is what I mean.
The song we're going to sing today, the little church that we've been a part of for a long time, they'd never had anybody bring guitars and mandolins and bass fiddles in until we started going there. And when we moved in across the street and lived there about a year before we started going. And we found out after we started going to church that they used to come out of church on Sunday night or Wednesday night, and they would hear us playing in the kitchen. We'd have our windows open, playing, and they would sit out there. And we used to look out there and see them sitting on the steps and say, look at them people. They are so friendly over there sitting around and talking. And they told us later, they said, we're sitting over there listening to y'all pick and sing. So we got to be, we've been in the church for a long time. And this particular song, we learned for a little lady her name was Isla Mae, but everybody called her Granny Mae. And this was her favorite song, and when she passed away and went home to be with the Lord, they asked us to sing this song. And heard it all our lives, but we had to finally learn it, you know. But she had a little alto voice that was so precious. I always tried to make sure I was sitting where I could hear her. And sometimes I couldn't help it. I'd turn around and say, Granny Mae, that was just great. And she'd say, oh, I can't hardly sing anymore. You know, she was so humble about it. But so many of the songs that have been sung today, they bring back a memory like that. And all of us, I've been watching the faces, and I can see that it's that way with everybody. It brings your own memory to mind. And this is the one that always comes to my mind
song, isn't it, Shirley?
when we sing this song. Yes, it's a true song. And y'all help us out. It's Mansion Over the Hilltop. I'm satisfied with just a cottage below, a little silver and a little gold. But in that city where the ransomed will shine, I want a gold one, that silver just over the hilltop, in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are purest gold. Though often tempted, tormented and tested,
like the prophet, my pillow a stone. And though I find here no permanent dwelling, I know he'll give me a mansion my own. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold. Don't think me poor or deserted or lonely. I'm not discouraged. I'm heaven bound. I'm just a pilgrim in search of a city. I want a mansion, a harp and a crown. I've got a mansion just over the hilltop in that bright land where we'll never grow old. And someday yonder we'll never more wander, but walk the streets that are pure as gold.
Hey, Bill, that church she's talking about, there's several of us that go there, but at one time, that church, I guess, had about as many Grand Ole Opry people and country music people in it as any church in the country, because Jack went there, the Whites went there, Ricky Skaggs went there, Ferlin Husky went there, Cal Smith went there, I went there, and Bill Monroe. And one of the funniest things I believe I ever saw one day, and it was never unusual for us to just spend the whole time at church just playing music and just sharing with each other and having music. And Bill would bring the Bluegrass Boys and bring the whole group dressed and everything to play. And one day we were sitting in church, and he always sat behind me because he picked on me. And he leaned up, tapped my shoulder. He said, "Have you got change for 100? I said, "No, sir, I sure don't." He said, "Okay." So he went up and stood up at the altar when they took up the collection, and when they brought the plates back, he put the 100 in and took out change.